Okay. Good morning. Om Ajnanatirmirandasya Gunanjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mano Bhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Sha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saritam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitam Scha Paramananda Partaya Prema Vakshaksharaya Te Sarvada Sarvasevyaya Shri Krishnaya Namostume Madeka Bando Matsangin Manguro Man Mahadana Manistaraka Bhagya Madananda Namostute Hare Krishna Hare Ram Jai Krishna Balaram. So we're reading 7th canto. Prahlad Maharaj's father asked the question, what is the best subject that you've learned from your teacher? So Prahlad Maharaj thinking, well, my real teacher is Narada Muni, and he's taught me about bhakti. So I'm going to give answer according to that, to your profound disappointment. So he tells his father that the best thing that I've learned is that for those who are embodied, whose minds are always afflicted with anxiety due to being devoured by the crocodile of asat, the material concept of life, basically, then those persons should give up the house, which is the degrader of the soul, and the blind well, which you fall into and can't get out and just die. And Manogatam Yadhana Masrita, one should go to the forest. And in the forest, one should worship Hari. So Hiranyakashipu laughed at this, thinking, oh my God, he's been influenced by the Vaishnavas who have come in disguise to preach all nonsense. So he tells the teachers to be attentive to Vaishnavas entering the space and influencing the children. So, and to educate them properly. So when the teachers, Shanda and Amarka, they take Prahlad Maharaj, they start to speak to him very sweetly, and they want to find out who's taught him these things. So he says, where did you get this type of intelligence from? None of the other students speak or think in this way. We certainly didn't teach you this. So where did you get this intelligence from? Who has given it to you? And so Prahlad Maharaj began to answer that question. So that was the passage that we ended on. It started with verse number, I think, 11, and it continues to verse 15. We covered the first 2 verses. So Prahlad Maharaj said, first of all, let me offer my obeisances to the personality of Godhead, whose Maya Shakti bewilders the intelligence of the living entity and makes them think in terms of friends and enemies. That is the bewilderment. And we discussed that point. There's really no such things as friend or enemies in the material world. There's just jivas and associating with the material energy. So according to how they associate with the material energy, they come to see someone as friend or enemy. But there's no friend, there is no enemies, there's just souls. And they're basically, in one sense, they're just souls and they're suffering due to the different concepts of life. So he offers his obeisances that I offer my obeisances to God, whose material energy makes souls look at each other as objects instead of as subjects. Right, we talked about this. We we self-objectify, and therefore we objectify others. And what does it mean to self-objectify? It means that we're consciousness and we've degraded ourselves. Normally when we think of degradation, we think of like, going to the club and, doing drugs and doing promiscuity and all that, so wow, what a degraded life. But actually degradation happens way before that. To degrade, degradation, and like in a literal sense, to downgrade. We're consciousness and we downgrade the vision of ourselves by looking at ourselves as bodies and minds instead of as consciousness. And from the basis of that degradation, all of life, the life of virtue and the life of vice, is proceeding on the degradation of the soul. And so because we've degraded ourselves by self-objectification, we naturally objectify others and think in terms of friends and enemies. Prahlad says, I previously heard about this, but now I'm seeing it with my own two eyes. Then, as far as your question as to where this intelligence came from, he says it has come from God himself. This was the last verse we covered, verse 12. It is God who has given this intelligence. He says, when God is pleased with someone, then what happens is the destruction of the animal intelligence. So he's referring to this vision of the vision of life where it's based on the degradation of the soul or self-objectification. He's calling it as animal intelligence, Pashyabuddhi. And that is the intelligence, Anya Eshatatanyyoham iti Bhedakata Asati. This type of intelligence is preoccupied with friends and enemies, minds and others. Iti beta, this difference, this distinction is asati, it's not very good. Okay, so then the next verse, because he said God has given this intelligence, then he goes on to say this God who is gifted this intelligence is very hard to understand. So this is verse number 13. Where are we at here? Oh my God, Prabhupada's purports are so long. So this is verse number 13. I'll read the translation here. He says, persons who always think in terms of enemy and friend are unable to ascertain the super soul within themselves. Sa esha atma swaparatya bhutibhir. So sa esha atma. So this atma, the word atma here refers to God. Sometimes the word atma also refers to the soul, but because the soul is an integrated conscious part of God. What is that? Mamai bhangsho jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana. Says the jiva is just a conscious part of the greater whole, which is Paramatma. The word Atma primarily refers to the super soul. He is called as the self of the self, right? And we've been using that analogy a lot these days, that the sun ray is essentially just the sun. It is the sun's own nature, which is donated. It is the sun who has donated his own nature to the sun ray. And so the sun is the self of the sun ray, so to speak. And so it is Paramatma who has donated his own nature to life, all of life, especially the jiva. And so we are like the sun ray and God is like the sun, and he's donated his own nature to us. And therefore he is a real self and he is the self of ourselves. So this self, Sa Esha Atma, this self is Dharatyaya, is very difficult to understand for those who have the intelligence of looking in terms of friends and enemies. So this is very similar to Bhagavad Gita chapter 7, verse 27, where Krishna says, Etra dvesha samutvaina dvandva mohena bharata sarabhutani samoham sarga yanti parantu. So in that particular verse, in the verse preceding it, Krishna says, I know past, present, and future, but me no one knows. Well, why doesn't anyone know you? And then he says, well, because as soon as they take birth, they become deluded by dualities. And what is a delusion? That they're preoccupied with the impressions of desire and hate. I like this, I don't like this, I like this. And so that preoccupation creates like a screen between the soul and God. one statement that we got from Donna Dharmaraj that I like very much. He says that when we say that we are separated from God, it's not in terms of distance, but it's in terms of consciousness. And so it's just like this screen in front of consciousness, and that screen is the screen of desire and hate and absorption in that. Just like if there was one curtain between, you know, the audience and the actor or dancer on the stage, you're not very far from them, but you can't see them because there's a screen that blocks vision of them. So in a similar way, we're not at all far from God. How can we be far from God? He's our very self. The sun ray can never be far from the sun. In fact, it can't even be separated from the sun for even a moment. Otherwise, it would cease to exist. So there's no question of being far from God, but yet there's this screen of Icha, Dvesha, Samutana, the imprints of desire and hate, which manifests as friends and enemies and all of that. So those who have that sort of intelligence, then it is very hard to know the self, because the self can only be known after we've given up that preoccupation. So this is probably the hardest part about, you know, this is somewhat considered like spirituality 101, but basically, as long as consciousness is at odds with anything in the environment, then it's not really possible to have a deep communion with God. It's not possible. So that's why this becomes like, even we're studying in our other Bhagavatam group that we do in the mornings on 3 days a week, second canto, the first steps in God realization. And so we're there, Shukadeva Goswami is teaching, he's speaking to the yoga path, and he's teaching how in the beginning they meditate on the universe itself as a form of God, or they meditate, the universe as God, God dwelling in the universe. And the whole purpose of that meditation is to bring the mind to a state of stillness, where it stops looking at the environment in terms of friends and enemies, in terms of like and dislike, and therefore creating animosity with the environment, becoming envious, becoming violent, vindictive, wanting retribution. All these sorts of things contaminate the mind, and God does not really, it's impossible to commune with a higher order of reality when the mind is in a state of turmoil, the turmoil that thinks in terms of exploiting the environment or thinks in terms of attacking the environment. So as long as you're at odds with anything in the environment, you can't really do higher communion. I mean, we have this practical experience where when you feel a little hate for someone for the day, sometimes it happens someone did something to you, hate them for the day or maybe for a week, and you pick up the video to try to chant japa, all you can think of is how much you hate them. I can't think of anything else. Like, I hate this fool, dude. Or, especially if you like live in the same space, then that becomes very interesting. You like chanting japa when they walk in the space, and you don't like the way they walk. You don't like the way they tie their kurta. You don't like their shirt. Like, you don't like it, and you just become zoomed in on that. So you can't even chant japa. You're just sitting there at Adikishan, but there's no communion happening. So for those who have this animal intelligence, then they cannot understand this Atma. Because he has said that this Atma, the Supreme Lord, he has given me this intelligence. That's what he said in the previous verse. So they may say, who is this Atma? Who is this Bhagavan? Who is this God? Yeah, for people like you, it's very difficult to understand. But what to speak of people like you, he goes on to say, not to speak of them, those with the animal intelligence, even such exalted persons as Lord Brahma, who are fully conversant with the Vedic literature, are sometimes bewildered in following the principles of devotional service. So, Muhyantaya Bhartmani Veda Vadina. So the Veda Vadina means those who know the Vedas. Brahmadhaya, all the way up to Devatas like Lord Brahma. He is the first living entity in the universe. He's the architect of the universe. He's the one who assembles all the elements to generate the whole world. So he's very intelligent. Of course, he does that because he studied the Vedas, which give information about creation. And so he's saying even Devatas all the way up to Brahma, who are knowers of the Vedas, Muhyantiya Bhartmani, they themselves become bewildered about the path by which this Atma can be understood. Anukramano nirupyate. God who is ascertained by devotional service. That's how Prabhupada translated that there. So in other words, what to speak of those who have animal intelligence and therefore they're preoccupied with their imprints of desire and hate, and they're absorbed in animosity towards the environment in some way. Forget them, they're finished. Even these fellows over here who know the Vedas, and all the way up to exalted persons like Brahma, the architect of the universe, he himself gets bewildered about the path by which this Atma can actually be ascertained. So yeah, he esha bhinanti mimatim. That Atma that is hardly known by anyone is the one who has changed my mind or made my intelligence this way. Thus answering their question about who's made your intelligence like this. Okay, so God is a mystery. In some ways, this is the best name for God, mystery. I think we grew up hearing stuff like that. God works in mysterious ways. Forget God working in a mysterious way. God himself is a mystery. Who is God? What is his nature? How can he be realized? All these are actually very mysterious topics. I know there's a sense, because there's a sense in Gaudiya Vaishnavism. There's a sense amongst the devotee community, because our metaphysics is so detailed and also so profound. It gives a sense that we know who God is. Like, we know who God is. God is Krishna. He's the source of the cosmos. And we can talk good game. But if you ask most Gaudiya Vaishnavas, most religious people also, if you ask them if they have seen God, we have to humbly bow our head. It remains a mystery, despite knowing so much from hearing so much Vedic literature and having confidence that it is true. We have full faith. Just by doing this bhakti yoga, we'll realize God and, we'll experience ecstasy. We have that, whatever. But if asked if we've seen God, then immediately we have to talk in a more humble way. Yeah, it's a gradual process. I'm on the path, I'm learning, I'm just trying to grow. Previously, we were thinking, talking with our chest up and our finger pointed like this to instruct. Then someone asks if you've seen God, you become humble, because it's very mysterious, actually. It's a great mystery. So it is a mystery for the animal people because they're animals. So everything's a full mystery for them. But even for those who are contemplatives and quite deep, God remains a mystery. So it is that mysterious reality that has made my consciousness this way. So the next verse, and I think this is the last verse of the passage actually. Yata brahmya teyo brahman swayam akarsha sanido. Tata me bitite chetas takrapanya yadrchaya. This is a nice verse. So he says, brahmanas, teachers, as iron attracted by a magnetic stone moves automatically toward the magnet, my consciousness, having been changed by his will, is attracted by Lord Vishnu, who carries a disc in his hand. Thus, I have no independence. So what is this intelligence that he's speaking of? And how is it different from the animal intelligence? So he's giving an example of the intelligence, of his intelligence. So what is that example? So he says here in the first line, Yata brahmya tayo brahman swayam akarsha sanido. So just as the iron is spontaneously attracted toward the magnet due to the shakti of the magnet has a potency in it that attracts iron. Akarsha sanido. If the iron is in proximity with the magnet, then the shakti of the magnet just, attracts the iron spontaneously and, unites with it. So in the same way, my consciousness is like iron, and in proximity with the Lord, it is spontaneously attracted to God. I'm helped. The idea here is that I've done no yagya, no tapa, no dhyana. Normally, you have to do some sadhana. So he says, I've done no sadhana, but spontaneously I'm attracted in this particular way. So we heard about this in the chapter 4, when we heard about his naisargiki rati, his spontaneous rati towards Krishna. So of course, when you're on the platform of attainment bhakti, that's called sadhya bhakti. So attainment bhakti is characterized by raga. You know, the soul of attainment is raga. That's why they call it as ragatmika. Once you attain the goal, the soul of that attainment is ragatmika. Whether you attain that goal by vaidhi bhakti or you attain it by raganuga sadhana bhakti, the soul of attainment is spontaneous attraction towards reality. Ishte sarasiki raga paramavishita bhavet. Tamaye yobavet bhakti. This is a definition of ragatmika bhakti given by Rupa Goswami. And it applies to all perfected souls, not just to the Brijbasis. Brijbasis ragatmika bhakti shines uniquely amongst all ragatmikas. But the definition of ragatmika bhakti applies to all those who have sadhya bhakti, like Narada Muni. All of these are ragatmika bhakti. They're all spontaneously attracted towards reality. And so that is the definition. Ishte sarasiki raga paramavishita bhavet. The spontaneous, sarasiki means spontaneous. Love, thirst, that causes a complete absorption, and that's an emotive one, and reality and Krishna each day. This devotion composed only of that is called as ragatmika bhakti. So Prahlad Maharaj is obviously of this type. So he's giving this analogy that just like our senses get the attraction towards the objects, you don't have to practice that. Like in school, they would give us, we had this class called sex education. One of the most useless classes we ever took in school. Most of the classes were actually useless, honestly. Let's be real. Like, what did we take with us out of high school? Not a single thing. I think the only thing I took out of school was typing. Like and a little bit of subtraction and addition. My division can use some help. My multiplication also is not that tight. But I got all of that in like the first grade. Or when you start learning math, like the first grade, second grade, something like that. So I took that out of school. Gopal, I took Wood's class. I don't know what that is, but I learned typing. That was really cool. I learned that in the 6th grade, so I took that out of school. Everything else I took, anyway, useless, but sex education was completely useless. You know, they would just show us these like nasty videos to like freak us out about the sex life. And that didn't stop anything. So why? Because Prabhupada says we don't need education in that. Why don't we need education? We've been doing sex life for unlimited births. No one needs education in that woodworking. That's pretty cool. So Gopal got some woodworking thing. So one thing. So we all took literally one thing. How many years of our life were we, 12 years of our life, on the news in the school, and we all took two things out. Great. Anyway, so didn't take much. So Prabhupada says we don't need education in that. We're spontaneously attracted. So like that, as we are spontaneously attracted towards the sense objects, so they are spontaneously attracted towards reality. That is my intelligence. That is spiritual intelligence. The spontaneous attraction that causes a complete absorption in that reality. This is the spiritual intelligence. So he's telling his teachers to ask how you got this intelligence and where it's coming from. So he's giving this answer to them. And then he closes out. Okay, so did I miss a comment here? I'm saying, love this new shirt. Everyone commenting on this shirt. Okay, I'm gonna pause here. My shirt is from Jamuna Bihari, so it was the shirt for his wedding. He ordered it for all his best men. There were 3 of us, but the shirts didn't come in on time. They came in much, much later. So he gifted it to me when I was in college. Thank you, Sri Govinder, for signing up on one of my subscription platforms. He's saying that I cannot figure out how to get this class from there. Can someone help? I usually send out a email at the beginning of the week with a link to everything. So I send out an email every Sunday. I send out an email, and the email has what we're going to be covering during the week. And it has a link to the class. And it also has, I'll also add a link to all the archived classes as well. And so you'll get that at the beginning of each week. And it also has updates of things that will be happening during the month. Like this month, at the end of the month, we're having a workshop with Mukunda Prabhu on the subject matter of Purva Rag in the Venu Gita. So we're trying to do more workshops to inspire taste for the actual goal of Krishna consciousness, which is, related to Krishna Lila. So it means we have to hear a lot more Krishna Lila to get a taste for Krishna Lila. So we've asked different speakers. We're trying to get different speakers to come on and do workshops on that. So we're having our first one at the end of this month called Purva Raga and Venu Gita. Everyone should sign up for that. This month, it's a free course, obviously, but in the future, all the workshops are be part of the Poshna subscription, which is the second one. So in the Poshna subscription, we're trying to do a monthly workshop, and also we'll do once a month a Q&A. Anything goes Q&A. Let's just like have Sanga, and we can just talk what's on our mind. And although I'll be like the facilitator and asking questions, it's meant to be like a Sangha for all of us to just talk and share what's on our mind, what's going on. Just maybe increase the personalism a little bit more. So that'll also be happening once a month, but that's part of the Poshna subscription. So you guys can go check that out also. I can work on the original email for the Shivananda saying thing and just go edit it and say, hey, here's the link and so on. So we're still working that out. But anyway, so I hope
Jaya, if the I signed up for the Jaya's family, I think it is, and there's
I
thought it does. It's a monthly thing. So does that automatically take it, or do I have to every month?
I think so. Yeah, it automatically takes.
Good. Okay. Good. All right. Good. And I don't think
just in case of forgetfulness thing is an issue.
No. It's better that it's automatic. I like automatic. I think you need to annuitize your seva. So have more people automatically signing up. Okay, great. And I'll look to the emails, and this way I'll find it. But for now, I'm just signing into this class with the link that Athena shared in the WhatsApp group a while ago. But I have to always go through the WhatsApp and search for it. So I'm just wondering.
No. First of all, in the WhatsApp group, you just have to hit the description box. It should be there only inside the description box. So you don't have to like go looking for it in the thing. Just go to the description box at the top, and then you may have to hit it, but you'll see it's right there.
Okay.
And when I send the email out, it'll also be there. It's every week, so you have it. Yeah. Okay.
You see how little I know about WhatsApp.
No,
that's the problem
bro,
when you have a senior citizen in your class.
We're older. I get it. You don't have to explain.
We are not older. I am older. You call yourself old. I am older.
I'm old, bro. I accept. I'm not in denial anymore. I just came to embrace it. Okay,
I'm ready for the forest. Thank you, John.
Siddha or
first I want to say thanks for organizing these workshops and these webinars, because I for one feel like being in the Western world, especially there's so much heavy modes of passion and ignorance that there's hardly any time for katha. So there's the only ways to balance it is to have that katha on the same platforms which are so much used to using it, Zoom, social media, webinars.
Sure.
So it's very nice that you are organizing these workshops and giving us an opportunity by which we can interact with these wonderful Vaishnavas and hear and chant with them. So thank you for making it happen. Earlier it used to be the case, I used to be excited about watching YouTube videos, but now I hate going on YouTube because the moment I open it, there's so many courses, so many things. I'm like, let me just watch some funny thing. I don't think I can watch any more Shastra there because got tired of it. So thank you for doing that. That was one thing. And now in regards to today's speaking, I was wondering that we often hear whenever you ask me in an hour class, what is Raganuga Bhakti? They say it is supposed to be spontaneous. And that, in the morning, instead of writing a Mangal Arati because of you won't get prasadam, versus you're rising up you're kind of fall asleep because there's Mangalati tomorrow morning. But what you are speaking today is that actually that spontaneity is there in the Ragatmika Bhakti coming out of Vaidhi Bhakti too. So that means what the rudimentary understanding of it, what is being taught as Raganuga Bhakti is actually incorrect. It's not necessarily just spontaneous, but actually that Raganuga Bhakti is in the footsteps of the Brajvasis. That's the what you can say the unique characteristic of that Raganuga Bhakti. It is not the spontaneity, because spontaneity, it seems, it comes in both the cases, whether you're doing Vaidhi Bhakti or you're doing Raganuga Bhakti. Spontaneity is in both the cases, but that's a feature of somebody who's at the stage of Ragatmika Bhakti or who has reached Sadhana Bhakti. Is that correct?
Yes. The English as a language is actually a very ambiguous language. I come to realize that reading Shastra, that English is actually very ambiguous, and a lot of words require like further explanation. Like to explain one word in Sanskrit, like bhav, you need like a lot of sentences in English just to break down the one word of bhav bhakti. So when you translate like Raganuga Bhakti or Ragatmika Bhakti as spontaneous in English, so many things are just lost. Like you actually don't know what is being talked about. So yeah, I think the use of the word spontaneous when talking about the sadhana Raganuga, maybe a reference to taste. Like you have a certain attraction to this type of Ragatmika devotion or that type of Ragatmika devotion. So that attraction can be maybe fairly described as spontaneous. Your devotion is not spontaneous. That's another thing about Raganuga Sadhana. There's nothing really spontaneous about Raganuga Sadhana. In a lot of ways, it's even more rigid than Vaidhi Bhakti. Because in Vaidhi Bhakti, as we often speak, it's just like getting the basic practices of devotion as a container. But in Raganuga Sadhana, you're really trying to build your inner world in a very particular way. That's another thing, another word, inner life. I'm starting not to like this word as much anymore because everyone uses it. It's become hackneyed. So everyone's like, you have to have an inner life. Okay, well, what do you mean by that? So a lot of the times what is meant by inner life in a more spiritual generic space is a life that is free from like lust, anger, envy, greed, illusions, and that's peaceful. That's what people mean when they say inner life, generically speaking. Whereas when Gaudiyas say inner life, we mean inner life like a gopi or a gopa. It's like a very specific meaning when we talk about our inner life and how we're attracted to the absolute. And so in order to build that inner life, there's nothing really spontaneous about it. It's kind of rigid, actually. There's a rigid study that has to happen so that you can understand what the inner lives of the Ragatmikas are like. And then in your own contemplative life, you're trying to build that by singing the songs of those Ragatmikas, by responding to life in the ways that you intuit those Ragatmikas would respond to life. It's like a very specific sort of building of the imprints that are congruent with that sort of Ragatmika. So there's nothing really spontaneous about it. But if you have to use the word spontaneous in that context, you may say it in terms of the attraction. Like, wow, I really like that. That's what I'm kind of attracted to. But now that you've identified your attraction, now the hard work really begins of building your inner world in that particular way. Otherwise, only Sadhya Bhakti is spontaneous in the way that our attraction to sense gratification is spontaneous. So they're just attracted to the absolute spontaneous as we are attracted to sense gratification spontaneous. That's Sadhya Bhakti. That's a very different thing. So yeah, a lot of these things just require like a Q&A and just everyone using like hearing the like Sanskrit terms broken down and then just use that word. Like first explain what is Bhav Bhakti and then just use Bhav, don't use mood. It's like people say a devotional mood. What you mean, mood? Like I didn't like your mood. Like just so like intangible. Like what do you mean by mood? Let's just use the word. Let's hear about the word bhava, explain precisely, and then just use the word bhav. Then it becomes a little bit more clear what's being talked about. Anyway, good luck to us. It's always confusing. Okay, everyone's commenting about the shirt. Athena says, Dare was effective in scaring the mess out of me about drugs. Okay, so you got a couple of things more. Didn't scare anyone I knew growing up. This is the kind of talk that shut down our Chicago Brahmacharya ashram, right? Sham Saka, we had a conversation with a very senior and accomplished Prabhupada disciple. We asked him why you didn't become an initiating spiritual master in ISKCON or a guru. He said, I am a guru and I have 6 disciples that I'm training. Lust, anger, greed, pride, etc. That's interesting. Is he the guru or is he the disciple? Anyway, of course, he's a Prabhupada disciple, so we can't say, but in our case, I'm saying as a joke, who is the guru and who is the disciple? Just thought of it when you were talking about inner life and Raghunath. Yeah, so most of us think about like that even. Inner life means being peaceful and being, self-realized, being free from the enemies. That's okay. Also, that's very nice. Such a person is called Atmarama. But the inner life that we're talking about in Gaudiya Vaishnavism is more personal than just that generic notion. Okay, anyone else wants to say anything?
Hare Krishna Prabhu. This is going to be repetitive because I have what is possibly a misconception deeply ingrained in my brain. But the possible misconception is that Ragatmikas refer only to Brajbasis. That's wrong, right?
That's not fully precise.
So can you have Ragatmikas in like Vaikuntha? Because
yes,
I think
all the Vaikuntha Vasis are Ragatmikas also.
And so that explains why you refer to Narada Muni as a Ragatmika.
Yeah, the point is all perfected devotees are Ragatmikas, because the definition of Ragatmika Bhakti is a spontaneous love thirst which causes absorption in the Lord. So that applies wholesale to any perfected devotee. They're all Ragatmikas. But Rupa Goswami says, Viranjantam abhivyaktam Brajavasi Janadishu. He says that the Brajavasis Ragatmika Bhakti, like shines, Viranjantam like shines, I forget the word, uniquely. Out of all the Ragatmika Bhaktas, the Brajavasis Bhakti is, what's the word I'm looking for? Like unique, but I'm looking for a better word. Suai generous, which also means unique, but I'm looking for another word. It stands out, basically. Out of all the Ragatmikas, their Ragatmika Bhakti stands out. That's the point.
So I'm just trying to figure out why, this misconception is, I think, kind of prevalent. Is it because of how it was explained in Nectar of Devotion in that chapter there?
There could be many reasons. I mean, definitely, if you're talking about ISKCON Sanghas, there's just a lot of confusion about this subject matter in general. And because it has also been tabooed in our Sanghas, so there's a lot of mystery around it. No one's allowed to talk about it without being criticized as Sahajya. No one's allowed to ask questions about it without being criticized. So because it's been tabooed, no one has been able to talk about it plainly and thus clear up things. So different reasons.
Okay, so this is going to be like a little bit of a paradigm shift for me to expand that term to include, and self-realized souls, basically, right?
And self-realized devotees, especially. Why not? They all love Krishna spontaneously.
Yeah. Okay.
Prahlad Maharaj is telling that of himself even here. So,
and the other repetitive point is, yes, the shirt is working. Good colors for you.
It's not even a shirt. Y'all just like that I'm not wearing black.
God, he sees right through us.
Oh, he's not
No,
wearing
but
glasses. This is very good.
but for our complexion, mustard is like very good.
Mustard, yellow, turquoise. I'm gonna try to spruce it up when I get to India a little bit. Use a little more.
You gonna try what?
I'll try to spruce it up. Use a little bit more color when I get to India. Okay. Anything else not related to the shirt? Okay.
Oh, I have one point I want to share. That it's quite interesting that Hiranyakashipu is always asking these questions, which are quite simple questions, but sorry. I mean, these are very simple questions, but somehow other Prahlad Maharaj is giving very sophisticated, very philosophical answers, which somehow don't seem to go into the head of Hiranyakashipu. Like, what's happening here? Why is he giving these answers which are not really understandable by him? You know, like sometimes we say we should speak in the language of people whom we are speaking to, but he's giving straight Krishna conscious philosophy right there, isn't it?
Yeah, what's the problem? His father asked him what is the best subject matter that he has learned. So he's looking at his father who's unsatisfied, right? We learned in 7th canto, chapter 4, that despite conquest over the whole universe, he was unsatisfied because of not conquering his inner life, right? Ajitindriya. We heard that. So Prahlad's looking at his father. He sees that his father is not peaceful. So his father says, what is the best of all subject matters? So Prahlad Maharaj is saying, well, for the embodied soul who is not peaceful, because his mind is filled with anxiety due to being swallowed by the crocodile of a sat, right? So in other words, looking at his father and saying, that's you. You're not a peaceful person. You're in full anxiety all the time because of your conception of life. So I've learned that the best subject matter is that one should give up the house. And as we mentioned, the house can mean the literal house, it can mean the body, it can mean the world of enjoyment. One should give up that house, such a house, which degrades the soul, and which is like a blind well, and then go to the forest and meditate on Hari. So he's giving an answer that's, a good answer for someone who's not peaceful and who's full of anxieties, which is what he's looking at. When he sees God, that's what he sees. So someone comes to us and they're saying, what's the best subject matter? Well, we think the best subject matter is how to attain peace. And this is how it can be attained. Then usually such a person, because they're asleep to such wisdom, they may not like it. So that was Hiranyakashipu's story. But others who are not so profoundly envious of God, like Hiranyakashipu was, they may be amenable to such a thing. It's like sometimes you ask a question to a sadhu and they give such a deep answer, you wonder, like, what did I ask? You yourself become confused. Did I ask such a nice question that I'm getting such an answer back like this? It's happened many times. I've seen it happen to me. I've seen it happen to other devotees. Many times when devotees would go to Ayanjaru's room, they would ask a simple question. And they would come out 4 hours later. 4 hours later, what question did I ask to get a 4-hour answer? I didn't think I asked such a deep question. So that is mercy. Sadhu is giving mercy like that. No problem. Okay. Anything else anyone wants to say? Otherwise, we'll stop there.
One real quick reflection on what you just said. You remember years ago when Chandramauli Swami came to, you probably don't remember this, but Chandramauli Swami came to the temple. This was like my 2nd or 3rd month coming to the temple. And then I asked him a question. And then he opened the answer by saying, you shouldn't be proud of your karma. It had nothing to do with my question, but it was exactly what I needed to hear to take further steps in Krishna consciousness. So to your point about sadhus give mercy, and that's kind of them. I remember that moment so strikingly, because I remember telling you afterwards, I'm like, this was my question. This was his answer. Do you see a relationship? Even you were like, I see no relationship, like completely disconnected. But it was exactly what I needed to hear. So
interesting. Right. There's this verse, Aham Vedi, Shuko Vedi, Vyaso Veti, Na Veti Ba. This is spoken by Srila, it's quoted in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And it says, Shiva speaking. He says, I know the Srimad Bhagavatam. Shukadeva Goswami knows the Srimad Bhagavatam. He says, Vyasa may or may not know the Srimad Bhagavatam. Bhaktya Bhagavatam Grahyam. The Srimad Bhagavatam is like, the import is captured by bhakti and not by intelligence or studying many tikas, commentaries. So the question comes, how can Vyasadeva not know the Srimad Bhagavatam? He is the author of Srimad Bhagavatam. So how are you saying that he may or may not know Srimad Bhagavatam? So Srila Sridhar Maharaj, when giving import to this, he says, because Vyasadeva is working as a conduit of God. And so when you're connected to that higher order reality and you're just like a conduit, you know, more like the mouthpiece and absolute truth is just coming through you, then even you yourself may be amazed by what you say. Like, wow, that was a very interesting thing. That it has come from your mouth, but you yourself are astonished by it. You may or may not know, like, wow, where is this coming from? This wasn't coming out of just like my contemplations, but something was coming through me. So when devotees are properly linked to God and a hearer is himself also properly linked, you know, then I used to say this all the time when you're, the Harikata is a living entity. So when there's a proper hearer and a proper speaker, the Harikata has its own life and can use those conduits. Okay, now you ask this question. Now you give this answer. Now you ask this question. It has its own like life when the student and teacher are properly linked and, you know, in devotion to God together. So yeah, that's a nice, thank you for sharing that story. It's a great story. How that all works out is quite magical. Guhyam Akyati Prichati, the 6 loving exchanges, it's all quite magical. Okay, so we'll pause here for today and no class obviously tomorrow. We'll be traveling to India, God willing, Radheshan willing, this evening. And so yeah, I'll see you all on Monday, hopefully, if I'm still alive and well and not dead from the travel. Om Tat Sat, thanks a lot. Hare Krishna, Hare Ram, Jaya Krishna.